Welcome to Taste of Revenge. If you're into cold revenge and dark justice, hit that subscribe and like button. This story will haunt you.
My name is Vanessa Alden, and what you're about to hear is the story of how my own parents mocked me for years, and how I made sure they never looked at me the same again. Sit back and let me tell you my story, and how I got my revenge. I wasn't always someone you'd notice in a crowd. For most of my life, I felt like a shadow in my own family. While my younger sister Chloe sparkled in every room she entered, with her golden curls and perfect posture, I was the quiet one. The serious one. The one they always said had potential but never quite fit in. At least not in their version of what fitting in looked like. My father, Alan, was the kind of man who measured success by appearance, job title, clothing labels, dinner party conversations that revolved around who bought what and where. My mother, Evelyn, was even worse. Her compliments always came with a warning. "You look good in that color," she'd say. "Just don't wear it when Chloe's around. She's the bride of the family." It was always Chloe. The princess. The golden child. And I was the cautionary tale. The "don't be like Vanessa" whisper when relatives visited. The one who didn't go to prom, who wore hand-me-downs even when we could afford better, who got accepted into a military academy and was told, "Are you sure? That's not really elegant." But I went anyway. I wanted out. Out of that house, out of their expectations, out of the tiny glittering cage they built for Chloe and expected me to envy. And once I left, I didn't come back. Not for holidays, not for birthdays. I missed Chloe's engagement dinner, my father's retirement party, and even my parents' anniversary vow renewal in Italy. And I didn't feel guilty. Because for the first time in my life, I was building something for myself, not for them. But then came the wedding invitation. A pale ivory envelope, scripted with gold foil, addressed to Lieutenant Vanessa Alden. No note, no handwritten message. Just the details, the date, the time, the venue, and a line that made me pause. Formal attire required. I almost laughed. I hadn't worn a dress in years. I set the envelope down on my kitchen counter and stared at it for a long time. Part of me wanted to tear it in half. Another part wanted to go. Not for Chloe, not for them, but for me. Because I knew something they didn't. And I wasn't the same woman they used to mock anymore. Got it. Continuing from where we left off. Staying strictly in first-person POV, with full consistency, retention triggers embedded every 12 to 15 minutes, and aiming for a natural, emotionally compelling flow. I hadn't seen my family in nearly 6 years. Not in person, at least. I'd caught glimpses of them on Chloe's social media, her bachelorette trip to Napa, their matching silk robes, Evelyn holding a glass of champagne with a smug little smirk that hadn't aged a day. Sometimes I'd wonder if they ever talked about me. Not in a "we miss her" way, more like, "Did you hear what she's doing now?" If they even knew. They never visited. Never called. Not even when I made first lieutenant. Not even when I was deployed overseas. Chloe posted a story the day I graduated officer school with a single emoji. Woozy face. No caption. No congratulations. Just that. So, yes, I wanted to go to the wedding. Not to reconnect. Not to play nice. I wanted them to see what they had thrown away. I wanted to walk into that carefully curated fantasy wedding they'd built for Chloe, the one with the flower walls and signature cocktails and imported lace napkins. And I wanted to remind them that the daughter they dismissed had become a force. And I had the uniform to prove it. The day of the wedding, I didn't touch a single thing in my closet. Instead, I opened a heavy case tucked in the back of my bedroom. Inside, my Class A dress uniform. Polished buttons, pressed jacket. Every medal and ribbon gleaming exactly where it should. When I looked in the mirror, I didn't just see a soldier. I saw every sleepless night. Every grueling training. Every doubt I pushed through. I saw someone who had earned her place, not through charm or connections or Instagram filters, but through sheer will. And that woman deserved to be seen. The venue was an upscale vineyard, of course. Wrought iron gates, white roses everywhere, A valet who did a double take when I stepped out of my car. I kept my sunglasses on until I reached the main courtyard. And when I took them off, all eyes turned. Some froze mid-conversation, others whispered. I heard my name 3 times before I even saw Chloe. But I saw them first. Evelyn's face paled so hard, I thought she might faint. Alan's jaw actually dropped. And for once, they didn't know what to say. You came, Chloe said, forcing a smile. She looked exactly like I remembered. Perfect skin, perfect dress, perfect timing. I was invited, wasn't I? I replied evenly. Her eyes drifted down to my medals. She swallowed hard. You wore that. It's formal attire, I said simply. This is the most formal thing I own. She opened her mouth, closed it, then nodded stiffly. Okay. That was all she could manage. We stood there for a few seconds, just long enough for a few of the bridesmaids to notice me and start whispering. I turned to walk toward the main seating area, and as I did, I passed Evelyn. She didn't say hello. She didn't hug me. She just stared, like she was trying to make sense of something that didn't fit the story she'd written in her head. And in that moment, I didn't feel small. I didn't feel wrong. I felt free. And if you think this was the climax, trust me, it wasn't. The real storm was still waiting behind the veil. I took my seat in the 3rd row, on the groom's side. It was petty, I know. But I wasn't going to sit behind Evelyn and pretend we were close. The couple in front of me whispered about my medals. Someone behind me coughed awkwardly and muttered, "Didn't know Chloe's sister was in the military." Exactly. The ceremony hadn't even started, and I could feel it. The shift in the room. For years they painted me as the disappointment. The angry one. The runaway. But now they didn't know where to place me. I was the puzzle piece that no longer fit their narrative. And I loved it. The ceremony began. Chloe walked down the aisle in a custom gown that sparkled like a chandelier. Everyone gasped. Cameras flashed. Evelyn dabbed her eyes with a silk handkerchief, pretending this was the happiest day of her life. But her eyes kept drifting toward me. She couldn't help it. I wasn't clapping. I wasn't smiling. I just sat there, upright, composed, unreadable. And that, more than anything, seemed to unnerve her. At the reception, they tried to ignore me. I stood alone near the back patio, sipping water. A few curious cousins came up and made small talk. One even asked for a picture. Said her boyfriend wouldn't believe she had a soldier in the family. But Evelyn never approached me. Alan avoided eye contact like it was toxic. Until the speeches. It was Alan who grabbed the mic first. He thanked everyone for coming. Spoke about how proud he was of Chloe. Then his voice caught. And, of course, my other daughter Vanessa is here tonight. Oh? That was new. I hadn't heard him say my name aloud in over a decade. But here he was, acknowledging me in front of everyone. I waited. Maybe this was the moment. The apology. The olive branch. But no. He added, despite the differences we've had, it means a lot that she's here, in uniform no less. I guess she's always liked making statements. The room laughed politely. He handed the mic back like he hadn't just spat in my face in front of 200 guests. I didn't react. Didn't flinch. Didn't even blink. Instead, I stood up, walked calmly to the DJ booth, and whispered something in the man's ear. He nodded. Moments later, the music stopped. Everyone turned to look at me. I stepped forward, lifted the mic, and took a breath. My name is Vanessa Alden, I said. My parents know me as the daughter who never listened. The one who left home, who challenged rules, who stopped pretending. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. I held their gaze. What most of you don't know is why I left. It wasn't rebellion. It was survival. Because in this family, if you didn't fit the mold, you didn't belong. I scanned the room, making sure they heard me. They mocked me, doubted me, tried to shrink me. So I found somewhere I could grow. I became an officer, I trained soldiers, I led missions. I found respect, discipline, purpose. Everywhere but here. Silence. No one moved. Even the servers paused. And then I said it. Dad, I didn't wear this uniform to make a statement. I wore it because it reminds me of who I am and of who I survived. Then I handed the mic back, walked to the exit, and left. I didn't show up to be seen. I showed up to remember who I was. And maybe, just maybe, to remind them too. When I stepped inside the venue, the air shifted. People paused, mid-laugh, mid-sip, mid-whatever. Like someone had pressed pause on their perfectly curated little evening. My heels echoed on the marble floor with every step I took. I wasn't hiding anymore. And when I caught sight of my mother, who had always been so effortlessly cold, she dropped her champagne glass. It didn't shatter. It just rolled. Almost politely. But the silence that followed, that broke everything. My father's jaw clenched, his hand tightening around the back of a chair. He whispered something to himself. My sister froze with her bouquet halfway up her chest. No one knew what to say. For once, their mouths had nothing to throw at me. I walked past them all, not stopping, not looking back. I took a seat near the back of the ceremony, far enough to not steal a spotlight, but close enough that they could see me, really see me. And you know what? It wasn't just the outfit that rattled them. It was the fact that I wore it without shame. The ceremony went on like nothing happened, but I saw the way people looked. The guests whispered behind napkins, tried to act like they hadn't noticed. My sister, always the star, kept glancing at me like I might explode into fireworks and hijack her day. But I didn't. I stayed quiet. I clapped politely. I even smiled once. But the real noise was happening inside them. At the reception, that's when the tension finally broke. My aunt approached me, eyes wide. I almost didn't recognize you, she said. I know, I replied. I barely recognize myself these days. She laughed awkwardly. That's not a bad thing. But it wasn't a joke. It was the truth. Later, when the dancing started, my father approached me. He didn't sit, just stood next to the table like some judgmental statue. You came to make a point? I looked at him, calm, solid. No, I came because I was invited. He didn't say anything for a moment. Then, that uniform, that life, it changed you. No, I corrected, it revealed me. He didn't argue. He just nodded once, then turned and walked away. And here's where most stories would end, right? Big moment, sharp dress, cold parents, boom, revenge. But if you've made it this far, you already know. Mine isn't most stories. What happened at that wedding? That was just the opening act. Sit tight. The real shift was still coming. In the weeks that followed the wedding, I didn't hear from anyone in my family. Not a text, not an email, not even a passive-aggressive forwarded chain message from my aunt. And that was fine, because I wasn't waiting anymore. For the first time in years, I wasn't living for their approval or validation. I had my life, my place, my own name, earned, not given. But just when I thought the dust had settled, something unexpected happened. I received a letter. Handwritten, no return address. When I opened it, I immediately recognized the script. Tight, controlled, my mother's. She hadn't written to me since, well, ever. The letter wasn't long. It simply said, "You made your point. Maybe more than once." I don't know if that was bravery or cruelty, but it left a mark. On all of us. Your sister's asking about you. I don't know what to tell her. Perhaps you should. No, love, Mom. No apology. Just raw, awkward honesty. It caught me off guard. Because I knew what that letter really meant. She wasn't asking me to come back. She was acknowledging that I had finally stepped out of the shadow they'd built around me. I thought long and hard before responding. And not just with words, with action. I booked a flight back to my old town a few weeks later. Not to beg, not to fix things, but to see my sister. To see if the one person who used to braid my hair and sneak me cookies when no one was looking still saw me as more than a headline from the family gossip train. When I got to her place, she answered the door like she was expecting a stranger. But when our eyes met, something softened. She stepped aside and let me in. There were no dramatic hugs, no tears. Just tea and space. We sat on her couch like two women learning each other all over again. After a long silence, she asked, "Was it always that bad?" I didn't lie. I didn't exaggerate. I just told her the truth. And for the first time, she listened. Really listened. And somewhere in that quiet, I realized something. I wasn't just fighting to prove a point anymore. I was healing. I'm ready, not for them, for me. That's when I knew my story wasn't about revenge. It was about reclamation, of voice, of dignity, of self. And if you've made it this far, I hope you understand this. Sometimes the greatest revenge is becoming exactly who they said you'd never be. And living like you were never broken. I stayed with my sister for a few days. Not because I needed a place to crash. I could afford a hotel just fine. But because, for once, it felt like she wasn't looking at me through our parents' eyes. She was just seeing me. One evening, we sat out on her balcony, sipping wine and watching the city lights flicker through the dusk. She finally asked, "So what happens now?" I smiled. "I don't know, but I'm not hiding anymore. That part of my life, it's over." She nodded. "Good, you deserve better." It felt like closure, not in a dramatic, movie-ending kind of way. More like closing a book you never thought you'd finish. And then, a few weeks later, something strange happened. I got invited to a reunion, a family gathering. Apparently, one of my cousins was having an engagement party, and against all odds, I got a formal invite, complete with RSVP card and gold foil lettering. My first instinct was to burn it. But then I remembered how much I used to shrink myself to avoid discomfort. And how small they had made me feel for years. I wasn't that girl anymore. So I checked attending. And I didn't just go. I went prepared. I wore the same military dress uniform I wore the day I got promoted to captain. Crisp, sharp, impossible to ignore. Not to flaunt it, but to remind myself, I earned this. Every stripe, every medal, every silent night crying in barracks. Every moment I almost gave up, but didn't. I walked into that hall with my chin up and spine straight. Conversations stalled when I entered. My father blinked. My mother actually gasped. I could feel their eyes crawling over every detail, the pins, the nameplate, the perfect posture. But I wasn't there for them. I was there for me, and for every younger version of me who thought she had to stay small to be loved. I greeted people politely, hugged a few old cousins, smiled when I meant it, and didn't when I didn't. And then I walked up to the snack table like I owned the place. Because, honestly, in that moment, I kinda did. I didn't wait for an apology from mom or dad anymore. That ship had long sailed. What I needed now was the strength to live my life fully, and without their permission. So I dove headfirst into everything I'd once been too afraid to try. I joined a local writing group, started jogging again. I even signed up for a self-defense class, just because I could. Every day I found little ways to reclaim pieces of myself that had been dulled, buried, or mocked into silence. And as I grew, something strange happened. People started to notice. At the grocery store, someone complimented my posture. "You walk like someone who knows exactly where she's going," they said. At the writing group, a woman half my age leaned in and whispered, "You're the kind of woman I want to be in 10 years. And once, while sitting alone at a cafe, a young man approached and said, "I don't mean to intrude, but you have this energy like you've been through hell and came out glowing." I didn't know what to say to that. I just smiled. Because maybe he wasn't wrong. It wasn't some dramatic makeover. I didn't dye my hair or get a new wardrobe or post inspirational quotes online. No, it was quieter than that. I started treating myself with the kindness I had always reserved for others. And that changed everything. Of course, the final confrontation with my parents was still waiting for me. That was never going to go away on its own. And I wasn't about to let it fester for another decade. So I wrote them a letter. Not a rage-filled rant or some carefully curated essay. Just the truth. I told them what their words had done to me, how their ridicule had echoed inside my head during some of the most important moments of my life. I told them about the therapy, the loneliness, the doubt. But I also told them that I wasn't writing to blame them. I was writing to draw the line. I told them I no longer needed them to accept me, that I wasn't seeking validation, that I had built a life, a good one, without their help. And that while I wished them peace, they no longer had a seat at my table. I mailed the letter and never looked back. But life rarely lets you walk away without one last test. As much as I wanted that to be the final chapter, life had other plans. A few weeks passed. The air had changed. Lighter. Softer. I was finding my rhythm again. Morning walks, tea in the sun, laughter without guilt. But then, one morning, a knock came at the door. It wasn't harsh. It wasn't frantic. It was careful, measured, like someone who wasn't sure they should be there at all. I opened it. And there he was. Gregory. Standing on my porch, his hands in his pockets, his eyes heavy, with something I hadn't seen in a long time. Uncertainty. For a moment, we just stared at each other. Two people who had once built a life together, now barely able to stand in the same doorway. I heard about the center, he said, and Amelia told me about the letter. My breath caught. He looked smaller than I remembered. Not physically, but emotionally. The sharpness he always wore like armor had dulled. I shouldn't have come, he added. I didn't want it to end with silence. I stepped outside, closing the door behind me. Not to invite him in, no, but to face him fully. You ended it with silence, Gregory. A long time ago. He nodded. I know. There was a pause. A long, uncomfortable one. He kicked at the edge of the doormat like he was searching for words in the dirt. Amelia said she forgave you, he said. That she understood things she didn't before. I guess that shook me. It should have, I replied calmly. He looked up. Do you hate me? The question landed harder than I expected, because the truth was, I didn't. I don't think I have room for hate anymore, I said. I spent years trying to be someone for you. Then I spent more years grieving what you took. Now, I'm just trying to be someone for me. He blinked, swallowing whatever response had started to form. I wanted to see for myself, he said, how you were doing, what you've built. Amelia, she talks about you like you're this hero. I smiled slightly. She's been through a lot, too. I know. He hesitated again. I wanted to apologize. But I stopped him. Don't. He froze. Don't apologize to ease your guilt, I said. You don't get to offload your weight onto me and call it closure. His lips pressed into a tight line. Then what do I do? Live with it. Grow from it. Maybe one day, use it to become someone worth Amelia's respect. But don't come here thinking a few words will undo what took me years to rebuild. He nodded, slowly, respectfully, and then, without another word, he turned and walked down the steps. I didn't watch him go. I turned and walked back inside, into my home, into my peace. And maybe that was the final chapter. Or maybe peace is just the space you carve for yourself when no one else will. Either way, this time, I chose it. The days that followed felt oddly still. Not empty, just still, like the world was pausing to let me catch my breath. I wasn't used to that. I wasn't used to feeling safe without needing to scan the room, without rehearsing comebacks in my head, just in case someone took a jab at me. I started waking up earlier, not because I had to, but because I wanted to. There was a new rhythm forming in my life. Mornings spent journaling, long walks without headphones, dinners that weren't rushed or muted by a screen. It was all intentional. And slowly, the noise in my head quieted. But life, as it often does, wasn't finished testing me. One morning, a call came in. It was from a local community center. I had volunteered once during a holiday drive. Nothing major. Just packed up donations and smiled at people. But apparently, someone remembered me. They were organizing a mentorship program for teenage girls, many from difficult homes. They asked if I'd speak to them. At first, I hesitated. What did I really have to offer? But then I thought of who I used to be. Quiet, overlooked, unsure of my own worth. And I realized maybe I didn't need to have all the answers. Maybe just being there, being real, was enough. So I said yes. The room was filled with girls who looked at me like I was some kind of superhero. It was humbling, even uncomfortable at first. I told them my story. Not the sugar-coated version, not the trauma dump either. Just the truth. What it meant to grow up feeling unseen. What it meant to fight for your own reflection in the mirror. And when I finished, there was silence. The good kind. Then a girl in the front row raised her hand and asked, "But weren't you ever scared they were right about you?" I smiled. "All the time," I said. "But I learned that fear doesn't mean you're wrong. It just means you're growing." Her eyes lit up like someone had handed her a weapon she didn't know she was allowed to carry. And in that moment, I understood something I hadn't before. This wasn't just about my parents. It never was. This was about breaking a cycle, so no one else had to shrink themselves to fit inside someone else's expectations. Motivator line buried here, a reminder of why the audience is still here. Because maybe you're not just listening to my story. Maybe you're remembering your own. I began speaking more often, not for fame, not for applause, but because every time I told my story, someone came up to me after and said, "Me too." That's how healing spreads, not in grand gestures, in whispers, in nods, in quiet bravery. And then, one day, my sister called. Not a text, not a forwarded meme. A real call. "Hey," she said, almost unsure if I'd pick up. "Hey," I answered. There was a pause. "I think Mom's been trying," she said. In her own weird way. I didn't respond right away. I didn't want to be cruel, but I also didn't want to pretend like that word, trying, erased everything. "Maybe she is," I finally said, "but that's her journey, not mine." My sister understood. That's the thing about people who've walked the long road with you. They don't always need explanations. Sometimes they just sit beside you, knowing exactly where the cracks are, and love you anyway. We talked for a while after that, laughed. Even made plans to take a weekend trip together. Just us. No family, no expectations. And it felt right. Like two women building a new bridge over a broken one. Meanwhile, back home, I framed the letter I had written to my parents. Not out of spite, but as a reminder of the moment I chose peace over permission. It hangs on my wall to this day. Not because I need to remember them, but because I need to remember me. A few weeks later, I got a letter. Not from my parents. Not from Amelia. It was from someone I hadn't thought about in years. Mrs. Holloway. My high school literature teacher. She had been one of the few who saw me when I was still invisible. The kind who stayed after class without saying why. Who left handwritten notes in the margins of my essays like, "Your voice is sharp, use it." The kind who loaned me her worn-out copy of Jane Eyre and said, "You'll understand this one day." The letter was short. Bianca. Someone sent me a clip of you speaking at the community center. You held that microphone like you'd always known how. I just wanted you to know. I saw it, and I'm proud. P.S. I still have your old essay on truth. Might frame it next to my teaching certificate. Love. H. I didn't even know how she'd found me, but it hit me harder than I expected. Because the world always teaches us to wait for validation from those who hurt us. But sometimes, it's the people on the sidelines, the quiet believers, whose voices echo the loudest. And in that moment, I knew something for certain. Closure isn't owed, it's claimed. From there, my life didn't become perfect. Let me make that clear. Healing is not a highlight reel. It's not candles and bubble baths and poetic journals. Sometimes it's crying on your kitchen floor over something stupid. Sometimes it's fighting the urge to reply to a text you know you shouldn't. Sometimes it's showing up anyway, even when you don't feel brave. But still, I kept choosing myself. Again and again. One evening, I was invited to a panel on women who rebuilt their lives. When it was my turn to speak, I looked out at the sea of faces and said, I used to think revenge was about making someone feel the pain they gave you. Now I realize it's about building a life so full, so beautiful, that their memory simply can't fit inside it. That quote went a little viral online. Not millions of views. Just enough that strangers started emailing me. Women. Teen girls. Even men. All saying something like, I didn't know how much I needed to hear that. And that made it worth it. Motivator line, woven in. Because if you've come this far with me, maybe this story wasn't just mine after all. That winter, Amelia came to stay with me for the holidays. We cooked together. She showed me how to make vegan cookies that tasted like actual dessert. Still not sure how. We stayed up late watching old movies and making fun of the dialogue. We even pulled out an old photo album and laughed until we cried at the fashion choices. It was normal, in the best way. On New Year's Eve, she and I stood outside on the porch, wrapped in blankets, watching fireworks in the distance. She looked at me and said, You know, you're nothing like the version of you they tried to convince me you were. I turned toward her, surprised. And who am I now? I asked. She smiled, someone who knows exactly who she is and doesn't apologize for it. I felt that in my bones. The clock struck midnight. People were cheering. But in our little world, it was quiet. And that quiet, that was mine. I used to think revenge needed witnesses. That it needed to be loud, dramatic, unforgettable. But now I know the most powerful revenge of all is a soft life, earned in hard ways. No audience. No applause. Just peace. A few months later, I got an invitation. Cream-colored envelope. Gold lettering. My parents' names embossed on the flap. It was for my sister's baby shower. I stared at it for a long time. Not because I didn't know what to do, but because I didn't feel anything. No anxiety, no dread, no need to perform, just stillness. Amelia noticed it sitting on my desk one day. You going? She asked casually. I haven't decided, I replied. She raised an eyebrow. You used to agonize over stuff like this. I know, I said with a small smile. That's how I know I've changed. Eventually, I did go. I didn't dress for war. No heels, no statement outfit, just a soft linen dress and a calm heart. When I walked in, conversations paused. Not dramatically, but just enough that I noticed. My mother looked up from arranging favors and froze for half a second before forcing a smile. My father gave a polite nod. My sister came over and hugged me tightly, whispering, Thank you for coming. I spent the afternoon talking to neighbors I hadn't seen in years. A few of them remembered me from school. One even said, You're the one with the financial thing, right? Saw you in that local paper, good for you. It was surreal. The people who once dismissed me now spoke like I belonged, but the truth is, I didn't need their approval anymore. I had built something solid, inside and out. Later, as I was getting ready to leave, my mother approached me. I heard about what you're doing at the center, she said, eyes flicking away from mine. People say you've helped a lot of women. I waited. She cleared her throat. That's good. It wasn't an apology, not even close. But I wasn't there for one. So I just nodded and said, It is. And I walked away with my shoulders light. Because the version of me who needed her approval, she didn't exist anymore. Motivator line. And if you're wondering whether I ever got the apology I deserved, you're still asking the wrong question. The real win? I stopped needing it. That spring, the community center expanded. We added new programs, job mentorship, legal aid, even a quiet reading space for women just needing time to think. I wasn't just helping others heal. I was honoring the girl I used to be, the one who sat at that graduation, humiliated and raw, wondering if she'd ever matter again. Now I was making sure others didn't have to feel that alone. Sometimes I still get recognized in town. A stranger will smile and say, You're that speaker, right? Or, Didn't you help with that fundraising gala? And every time, I smile back. Because it's not about being seen. It's about being seen clearly, finally, without having to shrink or shout. And one quiet evening, as Amelia and I were closing up the center, she paused by the door. You ever think about how far you've come? She asked. I looked around, at the walls covered with art and names and hopes, at the dimmed lights and the scent of fresh coffee still lingering in the air. Every day, I said. She nodded. Feels like a full circle. No, I said softly. It feels like a new one. We stepped outside into the dusk. The streetlights flickered on. Somewhere down the road, someone laughed. And in that moment, no fireworks, no applause, just the evening breeze and my daughter beside me, I knew I had won. Not with noise. Not with a dramatic gesture. But with the quiet, steady rebuilding of a life they once tried to tear down. And that's a revenge no one can undo. The next morning, I woke up before the sun. No alarms, no noise. Just a strange, soft stillness in my chest, like my soul had exhaled for the first time in years. I brewed coffee and sat on the balcony of my apartment, the city still asleep beneath a hazy pink sky, and I realized something small but important. I wasn't waiting for the next blow anymore. I wasn't bracing myself against the world like I used to. I felt steady. A part of me wondered if this was what peace really looked like. Not a destination, but a quiet rhythm you could finally move to without stumbling. That week, I went back to base. Routine felt different, lighter. I wasn't dragging the weight of invisible ghosts behind me anymore. I moved through my duties with more clarity, more presence. Even my commanding officer noticed. "You look sharper," he said one afternoon. "Something change?" "Yeah," I replied. I stopped apologizing to people who never deserved it. He laughed like it was a joke. But I wasn't joking. A few weeks later, I got a call from Chloe. She didn't waste time. "Mom's been asking about you again." I didn't say anything. "She keeps bringing up that letter you sent. I think it rattled her." I leaned against the counter, letting her words settle. "She wants to talk," Chloe said carefully. "Not sure if you want to." I didn't answer right away. Because part of me didn't. But another part, a stronger one, wasn't afraid anymore. So I said, "Let her call." The next evening, the phone rang. Unknown number. I picked up. There was silence at first, then her voice, smaller than I'd ever heard it. "Vanessa," she said. "I read your letter." I waited. She exhaled. "I don't have excuses. But I have regrets." The words didn't hit me like they used to. They didn't pierce or sting. They just floated. "I didn't know how to love you properly," she said. "I think I was afraid of your strength." I closed my eyes. That was the closest thing to an apology I'd ever get from her. And you know what? It was enough. Because I didn't need her to make it right. I just needed her to know it mattered. "I appreciate the call," I said quietly. "But I'm not looking to rebuild what we had. I'm building something new." Silence again. And then, "I hope someday I get to see it." I didn't promise anything. I didn't shut her down either. We ended the call on neutral ground, something I never thought was possible between us. And when I hung up, I didn't cry. I didn't shake. I just felt whole. Not because she changed, but because I had. Weeks turned to months. The leaves changed. The air sharpened. Life moved forward. And I kept moving with it, no longer running from who I was, but walking directly into who I was becoming. One day, while leading a training session, a new recruit pulled me aside. "Ma'am," she said, her voice nervous but sincere, "I just wanted to say, I didn't think someone like me could do this. But then I read your story, and I figured, if she made it, maybe I can too." I didn't know what story she meant. Apparently, someone had shared my promotion speech online, the one I gave when I made captain, the one where I talked about being the daughter no one bet on. That speech had made its way around, and somehow, it found the ones who needed it. That's when I understood the full shape of what I'd done. My revenge had never been about shaming them. It had been about liberating myself. And in doing that, I had quietly opened the door for others to do the same. I didn't need to be the loudest in the room anymore. I didn't need to prove anything. I was just living. Powerfully. Deliberately. Unapologetically. And that was the real ending. Not a bang, not a breakdown, but a quiet, unwavering truth. That the girl who once sat silent in a shadowed corner had finally become the kind of woman even her silence could not ignore. A few days later, I found myself back at the cafe where everything had started. Not the literal start, but the emotional one. The memory of sitting alone that morning before the wedding, stirring lukewarm coffee while wearing civilian clothes, it felt like another life. Now I walked in wearing my uniform. Not because I wanted attention, because I had just come from duty. But the moment I stepped inside, I noticed heads turning, some with curiosity, others with familiarity. And then I heard a soft gasp from behind the counter. "Vanessa?" It was the same barista from that day. Her name tag read Maya. I smiled. "Hey." Her eyes widened. "Wow, you look amazing. You're in the military?" "Captain Caldwell," I nodded. "Promoted last quarter." She blinked twice. "I remember you the day of your sister's wedding. You sat right there." She pointed at the table near the window. "Yeah," I said, a small laugh escaping. "That was me. You seemed quiet." "I was," I replied. "Not anymore." She smiled, and for a moment, I saw the way people look when they're inspired. Not just impressed, but hopeful, like maybe their own story could change too. I grabbed a black coffee and sat at that same table. No tears this time, no nerves. Just reflection. Because every scar I used to hide felt like a medal now, proof that I survived. That I chose differently. That I didn't let them define the rest of my life. I stared out the window, the city alive with its usual noise. But inside me, stillness. Not emptiness. Calm. The kind you earn. The kind you protect. And somewhere, deep inside, I felt her again. The girl I used to be, sitting here, afraid and unsure. I whispered to her in my mind. "We made it." And that's more than they ever expected. That's more than they'll ever be. A few months passed. The seasons turned without ceremony, the way they always do. Leaves fell, snow whispered across sidewalks, and then spring crept in like a second chance no one asked for. I kept going. Not with rage, not with some master plan to ruin them. Just forward. I had learned something unexpected during all of this. Revenge isn't always an act. Sometimes, it's an existence. A quiet defiance written in the way you hold yourself, the way you stop apologizing for taking up space. It's showing up, not to hurt, but to shine. I started mentoring younger women on base. Some were scared, some were angry, all of them were fighting something invisible. And I told them what no one ever told me. You don't have to be their version of strong, you just have to survive long enough to find your own. One of them, Private Reyes, reminded me so much of myself it hurt. Small frame, sharp eyes, always second-guessing her worth. One evening, after drills, she sat beside me on the concrete steps outside the barracks. "You ever feel like, no matter how far you go, they're still in your head?" she asked. I didn't answer right away. I just looked at the horizon, the sun dipping low behind a row of hangars. "Every damn day," I finally said. She nodded slowly like she'd been waiting for someone to say that out loud. "But then," I added, "you keep going. You outrun the echoes. Eventually, your voice gets louder than theirs." Reyes didn't cry. She just smiled. And I realized, maybe that was my purpose all along. Not to fix the past, but to light a path through it, for someone else. Not long after that, I received a voicemail from a number I didn't recognize. It was Evelyn. Not Mom, just Evelyn. Her voice was hesitant, controlled, like always. But it cracked once, right near the end. "I don't know how to say this," she said, "but I'm starting to see things I didn't before. You scare me a little. And I think that's why I never gave you what you needed. Maybe that's something I need to sit with. I hope you're okay, that's all." That was it. No callback number. No invitation. Just a strange kind of confession that felt half-finished. And maybe that was the point. She was never going to say sorry. Not the way I wanted. But the fear? That was new. For once, I wasn't the scared one. I was the reckoning. And she knew it. I didn't call her back. I didn't need to. That version of me, the one who would have begged for crumbs. She didn't live here anymore. I had made peace with silence. Not because it felt good, but because it finally felt like mine. And there was something powerful in no longer waiting to be chosen. Instead, I chose myself. Every damn day. That summer, I took a 2-week leave and flew to Portugal. Not because I had some deep love for travel or wanted to post pictures on a beach, but because I had always said I'd go and never did. I walked cobblestone streets in Lisbon, drank bitter coffee alone in cafes, and didn't apologize to a single person for taking up space at a window seat. I brought a journal, filled the first page with only one sentence. I made it. Not to the top, not to perfection, just through. And for the first time, it felt like enough. When I got back, I heard from Rachel. Yeah, my sister. She left a message too, but hers was shorter. Vanessa, I don't know what to say. You really showed them, huh? I guess I deserve that. I hope you're okay. Amelia's been asking about you. Call if you want. That one stung a little more. Because as much as I had hardened, there were still soft spots under the armor. Rachel had always been a complicated wound. Part friend, part traitor, part mirror. I didn't call her either. But I did write her back. Not a long letter. Just enough. Rachel, we are not the same. I'm not interested in revenge. I'm interested in peace. I just hope someday you find yours too. Take care of Amelia. V. I mailed it without a return address. Closure isn't always a conversation. Sometimes it's a door you shut quietly and lock from the inside. Weeks passed. Then months. I re-enlisted. I kept speaking. Small events at first, then larger ones. Someone filmed one of my talks and it went viral for a minute. A clip of me saying, "You don't have to be lovable to be worthy," hit some kind of nerve. Suddenly, people started recognizing me. Not as Evelyn's daughter. Not as the girl who ran away from a wedding. But as someone who had survived and turned the ruins into a foundation. And isn't that the best revenge? Not rage, not fire. Just rebuilding in full view of the people who never thought you could. And then one afternoon, I was standing outside a bookstore, waiting for an Uber after a panel, and a woman tapped me on the shoulder. She looked familiar, but I couldn't place her. Vanessa? She asked softly. I nodded. She hesitated, then said, I was at the wedding. The day you walked in, I was one of the bridesmaids. I didn't say anything. I should have. I didn't answer. I just wanted you to know, she continued. You changed something in that room. It didn't feel like shame anymore. It felt like truth. I nodded again. Not because I forgave her, but because I understood. People stay silent for all kinds of reasons. But when you decide to speak, it echoes longer than you think. That night, I sat on my tiny balcony with a glass of wine and watched the streetlights flicker on, one by one. I wasn't waiting for closure anymore. I wasn't replaying old fights in my head or drafting letters I'd never send. I was just there. Breathing. Still. Alive. The seasons began to change, but something inside me had already shifted for good. I used to count time by pain, by the things people said, the ways they ignored me, the rooms I wasn't welcome in. But now, I counted time by little rituals I created for myself. Morning runs with no music, Sunday trips to the market, lighting a candle before bed just because I liked the scent. There was a kind of magic in not needing an audience. And then, out of nowhere, came the invitation. A thick ivory envelope with gold trim. Embossed lettering, fancy like the kind you see in movies. Rachel was getting married again. Different guy, big venue. No drama this time, she'd scrawled on the note inside, like that would erase the last 10 years. The RSVP card stared up at me like a dare. I could have torn it up. Could have laughed, tossed it in the trash, and walked away. But I didn't. Instead, I mailed it back. Checked the box. Will attend. And wrote one extra word beneath it. Alone. I didn't owe them a scene. I didn't need an entrance or a speech or a dramatic reveal. I just needed to walk in, hold my head high, and exist without flinching. That would be enough. I thought about what I'd wear. Not a uniform, that wasn't the point. But something strong. I found a navy blue pantsuit. Tailored to perfection, sharp at the shoulders, soft at the waist. It made me feel like every version of myself, military precision and womanly grace wrapped into one. The day of the wedding arrived, and I drove myself. No limo, no +1, no grand gestures. I parked in the back lot and walked through the garden entrance, slow, measured. Not because I was afraid, but because I wanted to feel every step. The venue was already packed. People milled about with champagne and polite laughter. I caught snippets of conversations, stocks, summer trips, someone's kid starting school. And then they saw me. Not all at once, but like a ripple. One head turned, then another, then another. Voices dropped. Eyes followed. No one said a word. Until I reached the front row, yes, I walked straight to the front and sat down like I belonged there. Because I did. Rachel turned around from the altar. Her eyes widened. And for a split second, she froze. Then, she smiled. Tentative, unsure. But real. I gave her a nod. That was all. No scene, no cold shoulder, no snarky comment. Just presence. And if you're wondering whether I walked away feeling vindicated, the answer is no. I walked away feeling clean. And that was worth more than any applause or apology. After the ceremony, I stepped out into the courtyard. The sunset hit just right. Golden light casting long shadows across the tiled floor. It felt symbolic, like the day was folding itself up neatly, offering closure. A few guests approached me. Some with polite hellos, others with awkward small talk, pretending like the past didn't hang in the air between us. But then my father walked up. Alone. He didn't say anything at first, just looked at me. Not the way a proud father looks at his daughter. More like someone trying to figure out if a ghost was real. You came, he finally said. I nodded. I wasn't sure if you would, he added. I wasn't either. We stood there in silence, not tense, just full. You look strong, he said after a moment. I am. He nodded slowly. I always knew you would be. That was the closest thing to an apology I'd ever get from him, and honestly, I didn't need more. Because the version of me standing there didn't need permission. Not from him. Not from anyone. Later that evening, Rachel found me near the dessert table. Her heels were off, her bouquet wilted in her hand. I didn't think you'd come, she said. Seems to be a theme tonight, I replied, half smiling. She paused. You look powerful. I tilted my head. Is that hard for you to say? She laughed. A little. We stood there, two grown women who used to scream at each other through bedroom walls. Vanessa, she said, softer now. I'm sorry. For everything. I know I was cruel. I know Mom and Dad. Well, you already know. I looked at her, really looked at her. I needed you back then. I know, she whispered, and I wasn't there, but I see you now. Maybe it was the wine. Maybe it was the moonlight. Maybe I just didn't have any fight left in me. But I forgave her. Not with words. With a hug. A real one. The kind that says, we may never be what we were supposed to be, but maybe we can still be something. And just like that, something healed. Not all of it. Not perfectly. But enough. And whatever comes next, I added, I'll face it standing tall. No more shrinking. No more silence. The room was quiet for a moment longer. Not awkward, not cold, just full, like the air itself was holding its breath with me. Chloe gave me a small smile, the kind that said, I see you now, and maybe that was all I needed in that moment. The rest of the evening went by in fragments, candlelight flickering on half-finished wine glasses, slow music humming in the background, people chatting in clusters. But I wasn't drifting through it anymore. I was grounded. Present. No longer the ghost in my own story. Later that night, as I stood by the window in the guest room, watching the streetlights cast long shadows on the pavement, I realized something that struck deeper than I expected. For years, I had mistaken absence for power. I thought staying away made me stronger, that silence was the ultimate resistance. But real power? It's in choosing to show up, in walking into the room they never wanted you in, and taking your place without asking permission. That's what I had done. Not just at the wedding, not just in the letter, but over and over again, every time I refused to shrink back into the version of me they preferred. The next morning, Chloe and I had breakfast on her balcony again. No big conversations, no tears. Just two sisters quietly rebuilding something that had once felt broken beyond repair. Before I left, she hugged me, properly this time. "Come back sooner next time," she whispered. And I said, "I will." I returned home with a different kind of peace. Not the fragile kind that cracks when someone says the wrong thing. No. This was solid. Lived in. Like something I had built with my own hands. And as weeks turned into months, that feeling didn't fade. It deepened. One evening, I got an email from a local university inviting me to speak to a class of graduating cadets. Someone had seen my story, not the family drama, but my military record, the way I had led under pressure, how I'd built a career from the ground up. They didn't care about my past. They saw value in who I had become. So I said yes. The lecture hall was packed. Rows of fresh-faced students sat with notebooks open, eyes wide, waiting for wisdom. I started with a story, not about medals or strategy, but about walking into a wedding and owning a room full of people who never believed in me. Their faces lit up. Because it wasn't just a story about me. It was a story about them. About all of us. We've all been underestimated. We've all been told, directly or indirectly, to sit down and be quiet. To not be too much. To play the part. But some of us, we choose something else. We choose to rise. To become more than what they imagined. More than what they allowed. After the talk, a young woman approached me. She couldn't have been more than 22. Nervous hands. Soft voice. "I just wanted to say thank you. You said something I didn't even know I needed to hear." I smiled. "Which part?" She hesitated, then said, "The part where you stopped needing their permission." And that was it. That was the moment I knew everything I'd endured, every insult, every silence, every lonely night had shaped something that mattered. Not just for me. For her. For anyone who had ever felt unseen. Back home, I hung up my uniform, not out of shame, but with reverence. Like placing a sacred object back in its rightful place. I had more speaking invites on the way, a few writing gigs, and even a call from a publisher who'd seen a blog post I didn't think anyone would read. But more than the work, it was the life I was building around it that mattered. The mornings where I woke up and didn't feel dread. The phone calls with Chloe that didn't end in tension. The walks through the park where I felt like I belonged, even if no one knew my name. Sometimes I think back to that moment at the wedding, when I stepped into the courtyard and silence fell over the crowd like a sheet of glass. That wasn't fear. It wasn't even power. It was truth. Walking, breathing, wearing every scar with pride. They saw me that day. And even if they never say it out loud, they'll never forget it. Because I didn't just survive them. I transcended them. Your story might be different. But if you're reading this, if you've ever felt like the unwanted shadow in someone else's spotlight, know this. You don't owe anyone a version of yourself that makes them comfortable. You owe yourself the chance to be everything they said you couldn't. So wear the uniform. Write the letter. Walk into the room. Let them feel it. Let them remember it. And then, let it go. Because your life isn't about them anymore. It's yours now. And it's only just beginning.
If that hit you deep, imagine what's coming next.
Subscribe, like, and welcome to Taste of Revenge.